Shabbat Shalom. This is a very special weekend, and I want to begin with a couple of words of thanks and acknowledgement. First of all, I want to thank Amy Granick, who does our membership and programming and communications, and Krisha Miller and Sabina Sager and Sue Slatkoff and Tal Whittle, and I said Krisha. I looked at Krisha and I said Krisha, and Sabina, and did I forget? No, I think that was our group. Who all worked together to plan and to coordinate the visit of Rabbi Sigalit, who was ordained by the Hartman program and also by the program called Oranim, which is a wonderful college in the Galil. And she is one of 12 rabbis from the Shalom Hartman, from 12 Hartman rabbis who are visiting 12 communities in the United States and Canada, either this Shabbat or next Shabbat. They will meet in New York this week. And the purpose of that, of this is to help our communities get to know one another, so that we can hear from rabbis on the ground who have been tending to devastated communities in Israel since October 7th, and so that they can learn about the American Jewish community. This visit was planned independently of the events of October 7th. It was supposed to take place in November, was postponed, and we are grateful that we can welcome Rabbi Sigalit this Shabbat. I will also mention that yesterday she gave a shiur at the forest at Duke. Yesterday was International Women's Day. The shiur looked at issues surrounding the violence of women, including sexual violence that was part of the events on October 7th, that has gotten far too little acknowledgement and recognition, and looking at deep issues around vengeance, around collective punishment, and it was involved something that quite appropriately brought an extraordinary poem, is modern Hebrew poem that was written. I mention that because this weekend was funded from funds that were collected in memory of Rabbi Sager. When I spoke with him about different ways in which we could remember and honor him, as this will not be unfamiliar to anybody who knew him, he said just more learning. Just do more learning. Do more learning at Shiva, do more learning. And Shalom Hartman Institute was a home, really, for him for decades in Israel. And so to be able to carry on his memory and to learn in his memory is a deep honor. I will also give a commercial that in a couple of months, at the beginning of May, Rabbi Ed Feinstein, who was Rabbi Sager's Chavruta, will be joining us for a Shabbat. He is a speaker not to be missed, really an extraordinary speaker and teacher. This morning, Rabbi Sigalit co-leads the Israeli Rabbis Network, pluralistic network of rabbis from all denominations. She's a research fellow of the Kogod Research Center at Shalom Hartman in Jerusalem, a David Hartman Center fellow, and a fellow of the third cohort of Maskilot. She's a graduate of the Institutes and the Hamidrasha Be'oranim, a Beit Midrash for Israeli rabbis, where she received ordination in 2018. She received a PhD in Talmud from Tel Aviv University, where she received the President of Israel's Scholarship for Excellence and Scientific Innovation. Her dissertation was entitled Dialogues Between Jews and Gentiles in Rabbinic Literature. Rabbi Sigalit teaches Jewish texts and ideas in a variety of venues across the Galil. And previously, her work in computer science, research and development, studying social networks at IBM Haifa Research Lab, where there was IBM and RTI as well, so you've got some friends here, and published several research papers and patents. Rabbi Sigalit transitioned into a career in informal Jewish education. She worked for the Galilee Foundation for Value Education, which specializes in pluralistic Judaism and Jewish Arab relations, and for Metarim, which supports joint secular religious schools. Rabbi Sigalit.
Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. I want to start by saying that my paths did not cross Rabbi Sager's at the Hartman Institute, unfortunately. But I've been getting to know him through conversations with Sabina and just through being generously hosted in her home. And I'm realizing what I missed, what a wonderful, multi-talented he was. Looking at his library this morning, bowled over and sad again that I not. As Rabbi Daniel says, I'm here primarily to learn about your community, about the Jewish community here in the United States of America. I think for too long, it has been the feeling that Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, that we Israelis come here to spread forth the light. And I think that there is a lot of light here that I want to be bringing back home. I've been here since Thursday night and had the opportunity to meet many members of the congregation and to visit some of your institutions. And I'm so impressed by this warm and vibrant and inclusive and cooperative community. I really think that we have a lot to learn from what takes place here in this small, but as I said. So thank you for hosting, and you're all invited when you come to Israel to come by my small community. I live in a much smaller village called Shorashim, 150 families in the Galil, conservative community, egalitarian. You'll get an aliyah, I promise. Unless there's a Burma. And we're on Parashat Vayakhel, and I'm always reminded when we get to this parasha of a trip that I took quite a few years ago to England, and I visited a cathedral in a small English town that actually might even be called a village. And the cathedral is incredibly impressive, huge, immense, and with a lot of attention to detail, carvings in wood and in stone, and a huge bell tower, and a lot of art objects inside, decorating inside the cathedral. And I was amazed by the discrepancy between the size and detail of the cathedral and the smallness of the community. And I asked the guide what was going on, and he said, well, you must realize that this is a centuries-long project. It's not something that was built in a decade or two. It's generation after generation of people in this community raised funds and built another step in this cathedral. And so what you see now is the product of a community that has many generations under its belt and working on this communal project continuously for many, many years. And when I read this parasha, granted it's not a multi-generational project, but still what strikes me is this spirit of community building a project together, and the way that this inspires people to be willing to give up a lot in order to participate in this building project. And it's not to be taken lightly, because if you think about it, when Moshe leads the people of Israel outside of Egypt, they've all spent hundreds of years building as slaves. And so the act of building is associated in their minds with oppression, with suffering, with humiliation. And now Moshe has to inspire them to build yet another building structure, a Mishkan. And I think it's interesting to see how he does this, and you can see it by pointing a magnifying glass at this parasha that we read today. So first of all, I'm reminded when I think of slave labor of Charlie Chaplin's movie. What was it called? The one where he worked on an assembly line. Modern times, thank you. And you know, every one of those workers is working on turning one screw, and they don't really see the big picture. They're just focused on that one screw. And so what Moshe does when he's detailing in excruciating detail all the plan of the Mishkan is he's doing the opposite. He's showing these former slaves not their little screw, but the whole big picture. And so they understand at the outset what the goal is, what the plan is, what the structure is going to look like. And Moshe asks for donations of a lot of materials that give them a hint of how opulent the building is going to look, how beautiful it will be. And so they're inspired by this description. But before they start, Moshe reminds them about Shabbat, thereby promising them that in opposition to their slave labor, where they worked 7 days a week incessantly, now they will be promised and guaranteed 1 day a week of rest. For everybody, all the workers will be able to rest and recuperate. It's not like that slave labor that they experienced in Egypt. And right at the start, Moshe frames the project as a community venture. The parasha begins with the rare phrase, Vayakel Moshe, kahal, from kehillah, from community. This community is coming together to build this Mishkan. And Moshe continues, and he emphasizes the voluntary aspect of raising the materials, not through taxation, but through donations. And as he details the donations that are needed, people realize what kind of structure they're going to be building, and they also realize that if they contribute, then every time that the tabernacle, the Mishkan, will be erected in a new station in their travels in the desert, they're going to feel that twinge of pride. I had a part in that. And that's really inspiring to contribute, to take part. And indeed, the people mobilize willingly, and a stream of donation reaches Moshe's hands. He entrusts the management of the work to Bezalel ben Uri, who's described as endowed with skill, understanding, and knowledge in artistic work in various materials, and also the ability to instruct his assistants. But I want to suggest that there's another reason that Bezalel was selected, not just because he was a gifted artisan and because he was a good manager, but also perhaps because of his lineage, because of his family, because of who he was raised by. And I'm speaking specifically of his grandfather and grandmother. The Midrash suggests that Bezalel's grandfather was Hur, and Hur, says the Midrash, was the person that the Israelites turned to when Moshe was late coming down from Har Sinai. We read in the last parasha about Moshe's going up and about the people of Israel getting nervous about him not coming down. The Midrash says that they approached Hur and demanded of him, build us a golden calf, and Hur refused. And in response, he was murdered by the angry mob. And that was Bezalel's grandfather. His grandmother, again, says the Midrash, was Miriam. Miriam is identified by another Midrash as one of the Hebrew midwives who risked their lives and ignored Pharaoh's decree to kill the Hebrew babies. And so the courage of Hur and of Miriam, Bezalel's grandfather and grandmother, can be seen as two sides of the same coin. While Hur stands firm against the demands of her leaderless mob, the children of Israel demanding a golden calf, pressure from below, as it were, Miriam resists the decree of the almighty Pharaoh to kill the Jewish babies, resists pressure from above. So Bezalel was brought up in a household that upholds the tradition of standing up to tyranny, both the tyranny of a single ruler and also the tyranny of the mob. He's not just a good artisan and capable manager, he has the potential of leading while retaining his moral compass. So to summarize what we've seen so far about Moshe's method of enlisting the community to enlist in this, to take part in this enterprise, It's a community effort. You're promised fair working conditions. There's an emphasis on volunteerism and contribution. There's an exciting goal, and there's capable and morally upstanding leadership. And all these elements bring the people to take part in the construction of the Mishkan with considerable enthusiasm. There's an outpouring of contributions, so many that Moshe needs to ask them to stop. And the Mishkan is built, a sight to behold. So reading Parashat Vayakhel might bore you because of the length and the detail in which it lists all the materials, the parts, the measurements. But if you try and read it not through our modern eyes, but through the eyes of those former slaves who took part in that exciting project, and then looked at that tabernacle that was the result of their efforts with pride, knowing that they had taken part in this building, I think it reads different. Now, how does this parasha speak to me, an Israeli, in 2024? After this war, I think we'll need to rebuild our Mishkan, our state. We'll need to overcome our trauma and come together as a community to be willing to contribute time, effort, possessions, dreams to the building process. We'll need to elect leadership who will set before us an exciting vision of this joint rebuilding project while upholding our ethical standards. It sounds daunting, but alongside the pain these past months have shown us that the people of Israel, and I'm talking of the people of Israel within the state of Israel, but also in places like this all around the world, are willing and able. In the months before October 7, millions of Israelis took to the streets to demand that changes to the judicial system should not be undertaken without wide agreement. In the period after October 7 and to this day, millions of people are stepping up to the bat. And I apologize for the baseball metaphor at the evening of this important game. I haven't ever seen neither a baseball game nor a basketball. I want to tell you a little bit about my family, not because it's special. I mean, it is special, but that's not the reason that I want to tell you about them. I want to tell you because they're typical, I think, of these days in Israel. My husband and I have 3 daughters, 3 married daughters. And these daughters, the eldest with her husband, are doing their PhDs in Urbana-Champaign, and they've been spending hours and hours, perhaps days and days, putting up posters of hostages and going to city council meetings and so on. I know many of you have been doing the same thing. The second pair, my son-in-law was only released from the Army Reserves last week after serving continuously from October 7. He's in a special unit for medical evacuation on helicopters, and seems to have saved quite a few lives. And his wife, my daughter, took her sleeping bag the second week of the war and traveled to En Gedi beside the Dead Sea, where she stayed for a few months in temporary housing, helping refugee families find educational options for their kids, building a kindergarten, building a daycare center, finding transportation options for the kids to the schools that were founded in the neighboring Dead Sea hotels. The youngest couple, he's still in the Army, in the career Army, and she also, but she was on a maternity leave with our first young grandson. She took the baby with her. He was still nursing and went back to the Army for a few weeks to help her mates start things going with the war. And as I said, this is not special. This is pretty typical. And I think if we look at that and sort of step back and see the huge efforts that so many people have spent during these past few months, I know that it's not just our family and not just our families like ours in Israel. It's not just in Israel, but it's also around the Jewish world. During the past few months, I've met Jews from all over visiting Israel, supporting the families at Hostages Square, volunteering at hospitals and fields and farms and hamalim, emergency response centers. I've been on the receiving end of much needed equipment and also a lot of love. And I want to tell you that it really, really warms our hearts. And all these efforts have been pouring into the project of defending Israel against horrendous attack. But now we need to move on to the next stage, the rebuilding. And with such dedication, such love, such community spirit, I believe we're able to do that. But there's also a word of caution that I'll take from a Yehuda Amichai poem. And I know that Rabbi Sager appreciated Yehuda Amichai. It's a famous one, and I want to read a portion of it. He wrote, "From a distance, everything looks like a miracle. But up close, even a miracle doesn't look like that. Even someone who crossed the Red Sea when it split saw only the sweating back of the man in front of him and the swaying of his big thighs." So far I've been talking about the exhilaration, the excitement, the inspiration, the outpouring of goodwill, all focused on defending and then hopefully rebuilding. But as Yehuda Amichai reminds us, even the most miraculous processes are made up of many sweating backs and swaying thighs, of difficulty, and also moral dilemma. And even as the miracle proceeds, the individuals taking part in it are so focused on their effort that they may lose sight of the beach on the other side. So I want to end with a deep breath and a word of caution and a reminder to me too, that it will be difficult, that we'll need tremendous perseverance and dedication and help. And we'll need upstanding leadership and community spirit and a willingness to stand up to tyranny and to uphold our ethical standards. And also that we should remember to look up from time to time from the sweating backs and the swaying thighs, and remember that building a cathedral or building a Jewish state can take centuries, patience. And through these times, we need to remember the miracle and the destination of the journey.